Hello, good afternoon, good evening, good wherever, whenever you are. It's Ben here with another interview for Cryx. This time I'm with Raelyni, head coach for Avidity and also Fable and Calling All Heroes, coming to us from an undisclosed location, one of our nation's finest institutions. How are things going today as you're getting ready for stage 4?
Oh, good. Just having a little interview during lunch. I've been prepping hard this week for stage four. So, be a very busy and exciting week, hopefully.
Mm-hmm. So I want to start off by talking about some of the roster things that happened with your team leading up to stage 4. So starting off with the weekend before Swiss, there was a team that popped up on Face It that I think competed in one of the We Are So Back tournaments. That was called Avidity X Nightmare. And this team had a pretty wild roster.
Yeah.
It was, I believe, Wub, Sunset, who is a Thai American player who recently played for Yushia Esports in OWCS Pacific. There might have been a third DPS there as well. I think Lampant, maybe. And then the tank player was Kalios. You know, we all know who that is. And the support line was Lee Soo-min, formerly with Heijokdan and Sinprisa, Seoul Dynasty, etc. And then Len and Nenwai. So walk us through what happened here.
Yeah. So, I mean, for the whole thing with the Korean roster, basically, a third party approached us and we were in discussions about uh, basically having Korean imports be sponsored to come play in NA. And I think originally that discussion involved Flack. Um, but basically that conversation happened like in the early morning on Friday. And then I think maybe somewhat prematurely, uh, like a WhatsApp roster was made and people were put on it. But by the end of the weekend, we basically decided that wasn't like the route that we wanted to go. Um, Due to a lot of different reasons. But I think part of the reasoning for doing the wasab was like just a little bit for like attention in some way. But at the end of the day, I think maybe it was like a little too early to go with that, especially because like particularly for what we needed for an OWCS roster, it had like players that we didn't really need. Like Sunset is like a hit scan player, and we have Wub, and Callius is a tank player, and we have Pela and TwolzZ, right? So it really wasn't the direction that we ended wanting to go with our roster. So we ended up just going with a more full NA roster, except for TwolzZ, obviously. So that was the direction we wanted to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you know why TwolzZ has been sort of taking this North America direction the past two stages? Because it's something
Yeah.
that is, I think, kind of unprecedented for him.
Yeah, actually, so he moved here because of his girlfriend, and his girlfriend is now his wife. So they actually
Oh,
got married
so
last
he's
week.
living in the United States or in?
Yeah, he's in California right
Oh,
now,
okay,
so that's
interesting.
why he's playing in NA. Yeah,
Interesting. There you go. That's always good. Yeah, yeah. Because the Avidity Nightmare thing, and I don't know all the specifics, but to my knowledge, there was some business with basically somebody kind of claiming to have money and connections that they maybe should not have been claiming to have, is my understanding of it.
yeah. I don't want to comment too much on the situation because we've gone a lot of back and forth. But basically, the person approached us. They couldn't prove that they were able to follow through with this trip, so we ended up distancing, like we didn't want to go that route. We were still actually talking with some of the Korean players to do like sort of staff sponsored like imports and stuff like that. Um, but again, we ended up deciding we wanted to just field an NA roster um, due to like mostly like coordination and language barrier issues. So
Yeah, so then you ultimately announce this roster, and within less than 12 hours, you've already lost a player. I remember actually because
we lost
I had been
two actually.
two. So we'll start with, so I actually, I remember Friday morning because I had asked Wisps, what he was doing for the stage, and we had talked a little bit, and I wake up Friday morning to a DM that he sent me at 3:30 in the morning my time, which is like midnight for him, being like, I'm not on Avidity anymore. And my reaction was basically, God, can we just go one day without something ridiculous happening? So what happened there in terms of with Wsps specifically?
Yeah, I think that he just wanted to sub for Fluffy. Like, I don't think it was like that deep, to be honest. Like, when we were talking with Scuffed and Bun and Wisp, they all like have played together before and they like each other. But we told Wisp that, like, we like Wub and we wanted Wub to start, and he was cool with that. And then I think he just wanted to sub for Fluffy, and so then he just rotated. So I don't think there was any malice there or anything like that. I think it was just like that's just what he wanted to do, and we were cool with it, so it was fine.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think I thought there was any. I don't think anybody really thinks there's any malice.
Yeah, it was not a big
most
deal.
of these. It's just more like what happened. So you say you lost another player. Who are you referring to?
Durpee. He was on our roster for
So
less than 24
so
hours.
was that actually was he
It was
actually
real,
on
yeah.
the team? Okay.
Yeah, he was on our OWCS roster, and then the next day, because we had talked to him about like expectations or like if like gameplay time, and we had discussed like theory crafting of like, oh, when could we play Ryan or whatever, and then he said, hey, I just want to play for a team where I can just play full time, and we were like, okay. So then he just made the pug team, and they're doing really well, so happy for him. So.
Yeah, we'll talk
but yeah,
about
he was
that.
actually on our roster. He has an alumni role in our server because he was here.
You're in the same group as Durpee's team. I mean, I would say it's pretty likely that you'll end up playing them. So like how do you prepare for a team like that?
I mean, we scrim actually this week because like usually people don't scrim people who are in their own group, but I think it's kind of nice to have an opportunity to like test stuff. Um, but yeah, no, I mean, preparing is some of it is theory crafting, some of it is just playing stuff and seeing what works. I think we learned a lot also in our game with what works and what doesn't work. So, but we're preparing for both, for actually all three games. But realistically, the games that we have to win are against Romani and Durpee's teams. So we're preparing for this.
Yeah.
So
obviously, and even like Romani's team, not quite as much of like a one trick as Durpee, but he's gonna break glass and pull out the Junker Queen in a lot of situations.
no, he's got a nasty J Queen.
He's
got a
good.
nasty J Queen.
He really like
Yeah.
it's actually insane. Like he makes it work. It's really scary, and I think he's a good like in-game leader too. Just from like watching his streams when he's playing with teams, he's like, it's like if I was his teammate, I would like ride into battle for him. That's the vibe I'm getting.
Yeah, I mean the hope that realistically like his full roster is really scary. Like their DPS line is really good, their support line is really good. So we're just taking this week super seriously, and we're gonna try the best that we can to prepare. And obviously, we're not going to just prepare for those two teams. Like we're going to be playing against like meta teams, right? Like if you want to call it that,
Mm-hmm.
maybe we can win against Nightmare. It would be a hard game, but we're gonna do our best. So
I feel
hope
like
that we can have a good showing this weekend.
I think it's. I mean, obviously it's difficult, but I don't think it's impossible. Honestly,
No,
especially
not at all.
like everything in North America seems kind of, especially with the meta, seems kind of messy at the moment.
Yeah, the meta is like it's definitely a teamwork oriented meta. Like you really have to coordinate really, really well to do well in this meta. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think that's why you've seen a lot of upsets where it's like maybe like a little bit less mechanical, and that like you'll have like somebody who just like pops off, but you'll have really like teams that just have really good synergy tend to do very well. And I think you saw that over the weekend as well.
Mm-hmm.
So
Speaking of last weekend, I want you to walk me through. You had a pretty tense match. I think yours was the last one to finish, basically. Against a team calling themselves Cry X, with was basically like the old Cry X roster from a year or two ago. So walk us through a little bit, like what was that match like from your perspective? How are you sort of rallying your players after taking a couple of rough losses that day, going into like this do or die situation.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of pressure. There's like a kind of a meme that like Wub has never made groups, right? And so I think some of that was like weighing on him a little bit. Um, but we were trying to just reset after uh, those two losses that we had. I think maybe they hit our team's mental a bit more than they should have. And so like this roster realistically only got together on Thursday. And we had like one day of scrim before. So like learning how to interact and play around each other was difficult to some extent. Mostly listening to each other was difficult at times. So after those losses, we really encouraged them to go get off the computer, take a walk around their house or their neighborhood if it was safe to do so, wash their face, do something. I think sometimes these Swiss days can be really, really, really long, and players can become exhausted. Like to be honest, like even me, I'm like exhausted just sitting there watching and coaching. Like I can't even imagine. Like it's been years since I played. I actually played like a Swiss. So the first round even was a little shaky, the first map, but I think once we like really encourage them to walk into the passion. Like we were joking about like showing the passion. And so then there was one map, I think then I posted a clip of it on Twitter where Wub was just like screaming, trying to like unlock the passion, I guess, or whatever. So once we got to that point, like we kind of fell back into the rhythm that we had been feeling more on Saturday. Especially versus Shiki, I think like our coordination looked really nice and clean. And then it just sort of, there was just like a hiccup on Sunday. But I'm really happy that we were able to reset and come back to center. I'm really proud of my players for being able to do that, because it takes a lot of willpower that often I don't even have to do. So the way that like we approached it is just basically like get off your computer, just get off your computer, go do something else, and that
Touch some
seems to
grass.
help quite a bit. Yeah, touch grass, literally. Yeah.
Obviously, you're saying we. What does like the sort of split of responsibilities look like between you and your assistant coach? Okay, I've had the pronunciation done for me before.
I cannot pronounce Nat's name. He's
I
gonna
think
flame the
it's
fuck out of me if he sees that.
Natdoekje or no, I'm
Let's get
pronouncing it
close.
wrong.
Let's
Ocean explained it to me, and I was like, okay, I get it now, and then I forgot.
we just call him Nat. Yeah.
What does
So
the splitting of duties look like?
yeah, so honestly, like so Nat is between the two of us, I think the more experienced coach for sure. So he has coached at a higher level than me for years. And so the relationship really is more of a mentee mentor kind of relationship. So even though I'm the head coach, like he and I like talk together about like how to best approach coaching as like a teaching like position basically. And so I think now that we've worked together for I think a year almost, because we started working together on Yippee back last year. I think now we've gotten to the point where it's more like a reciprocal relationship where both of us are just splitting duties. Like one person will do VOD one day, one other person will do VOD another day. I'm like helping prepare like pre-scrim and like prepping the comps that we're going to play and giving feedback to players and stuff like that. But definitely at the beginning of the relationship, like I think that he was like more leading the macro that we were doing. And I think over time, that's now been like we have a very equal relationship on how we approach Avidity and the direction that we want to go. For the most part, though, I think like our the way that we approach like coaching the players is that instead of coaching at them, we're coaching with them. So whenever I'm like talking to them about stuff or Nat's talking to them about stuff, we'll say like, I think this is good. What do you think? And that kind of thing. So I think that ends up being an easier burden for the two of us when splitting coaching responsibilities because we're really looking to get player feedback and see what feels good for them and what they like to do. Because at the end of the day, meta doesn't really mean anything if your players can't play meta. So what our players are good at and what they feel is good, we want to do. So that's what we end up going with for like our coaching style or responsibility between the two of us.
Yeah, and speaking of the one constant that I noticed in the Swiss stage was like a lot of Juno. it's very interesting. I think Juno is kind of really upset the sort of flex support main support paradigm, because you've got some
Yeah, for
teams
sure.
are like in Asia, a lot of teams were running their main support on Juno and pairing her with a traditional flex support character, often Ana. And then in Europe, in like Face It League, you saw a lot of teams putting their flex support on Juno and pairing her with Brigitte, a typical main support hero. Although a few teams were doing Juno Brig and putting their flex support on Brig and their main support on Juno. The point being, it's really kind of flipped a lot of the, it's sort of thrown a lot of those traditional roles out the window. How are you approaching building those support compositions as a coach in this current meta?
Yeah, so a lot of what the way people are approaching it is like based on swaps. So as the meta like evolves, um, Juno Brig was like hard meta, right? And then it was just impossible to kill. And I think as people are learning, because meta really is a thing that like grows and evolves with the player base. It's like, okay, well, Juno Ana is really good, or Juno Kiri is really good. So if we want to swap to that, how do we do that? Like a lot of this meta right now is like, okay, Juno Brig is good into dive. Can it be good in Brawl? I think a lot of people are playing a lot of like Ram Juno Brig. We were playing a lot of Ram Juno Brig. And do we want in a situation where like, let's say that we think like Ana is better, do we want to give up two ultimates to switch our characters? Do we want our main support to play Ana? Like, how flexible is your main support? Do we want our flex support to play Brig? Because if you play Juno Brig, then that makes a swap to Ana or Kiri easier. But at the end of the day, you have to play around what your players are good at, right? You can have like some ideal situation where, you have your main support on the characters that they are completely best at, and you have your flex support on the characters that they are best at. But sometimes that makes things like adjustments to what the enemy team is running very difficult. So you have to build around that. And that's something that we're still working on, to be honest. So
Yeah, I mean, you've got, just to give two examples kind of for people who maybe haven't, aren't necessarily super familiar with some of this, like I'm thinking of Space Station might put Landon on Brig because he can play that. Toronto Defiant might do something where they are comfortable having Vega swap over to Ana or Kiriko if needed,
exactly.
because he can play those heroes. It seems like the future is, just have two supports who can kind of play everything. I don't know if we're quite
Yeah.
there yet, but it seems like we're trending ever more in that direction with players like, Violet, Gala, Luke Mino, Polly, like, etc.
I mean, to me, like main support just it basically is the support that plays Lucio
Right.
at this point. So really what the definition of it is like what your players are good at, right? I think a lot of coaching is figuring out what your players are good at and making comps that work around your players' strengths, right? Because at the end of the day, when you're coaching a roster, you're coaching a group of people, not necessarily like 5 or 6 or 7, whatever, uh, uh, non-specific humans that are on a computer, right? Like you're actually coaching real individuals that have their own personal strengths. Then you have to adjust your coaching style based on that and the comps that you pick.
Yeah. Like, for example, you have Scuffed, who's quite good at Juno. I want to move over to the tank role. This is actually, I should have looked at like which of your tanks played more during Swiss. That would have been useful to have. But what are some of your plans to like work this tank rotation between Pela and TwolzZ?
Like honestly, like who plays is, if I'm like really honest, like sometimes it's just a vibe, like based on what we're feeling that day. Some of it is a matchup thing, like somebody understands like a specific matchup better. And some of it is like a leadership thing, where we have one tank that talks a lot and we have one tank that talks like a medium amount, right? So a lot of it is just based on that sort of thing. And I think this week we've been talking a lot about who feels more comfortable in certain matchups and playing towards that. So, um, like super honestly, like it is kind of just a vibe thing. They do have different hero pools, but they have a lot of overlap. And I think both Pela and TwolzZ are good tanks, and they can play all tanks.
Mm-hmm.
Some better than others, but we don't have a flexibility issue.
Yeah.
Uh,
You
so
foresee kind of swapping them out and not necessarily like picking one and sort of sticking with him for an
Yeah,
extended
I mean,
period of
even
time.
we had some thought process about how we wanted to do the lineup over the weekend, and then we changed it like later, just based on how the players were feeling that day and what we felt like we needed in our team environment. Because sometimes, some days people are having an off day, and we just need maybe more comms, or we need somebody who has like a different play style that day. Um, and I think one thing that we really try and do at Avidity is make sure that there's like an open line of communication between the staff and players as much as we can,
Mm-hmm.
um, and saying like, "Hey, I feel like this isn't working. What do you guys think?"
Mm-hmm.
And then talking about that openly with each other. Um, and I don't think either of our tanks feel insecure because we talk openly about like, I think you're struggling. What do you think? Like, do you need a break? Do you think we should do this? And sometimes, they'll say, no, 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 I'm good. But sometimes they'll be like, yeah, no, I am struggling. I need to sit for a bit. And that's fine. And that is one of the things that's really nice about having subs and two people that are both really good that can easily interchange with one another. We have the flexibility to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm reminded of Wheats telling me that he thinks this meta is more likely to just sort of have a starting five that you kind of stick with versus the previous one where he was doing a lot of substitutions. So I think it's always nice to see different approaches to things. So I want to
No,
look
I do think
back.
like
Oh,
team sorry to interrupt you.
no, go.
I do think teamwork is really important in this meta. So I, I get why you say that,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
for sure.
So I want to look back
Sorry,
a
go
little
ahead.
bit to stage three. So your first match, you beat Timeless Ethereal 3-0, and then you go up against them again to decide who makes top eight, and they beat you 3-0. So why do you think you were able to beat them the first time but weren't able to repeat that in the rematch?
Honestly, I think that they just thought we were bad. I just think they thought that we were really bad and that they didn't need to prepare. Um, and we showed them that they weren't bad, that we weren't bad, and that they did need to prepare. And I don't have like confirmation of this, but what I heard is that they were like doing doubles and triples like that entire week, like leading up to the weekend, because they were so uh embarrassed, I guess. I don't know the right word of like losing to us.
Yeah,
And we knew
Timeless.
about
They have a tendency to do that where they lose and then they get really mad and come back with sort of murderous rage, as I
yeah, I
described it
mean,
in our
Scuffed
last.
and Bun have told us that we saved them. They saved that roster basically
Mm-hmm.
because we kind of like lit a fire for them because they were getting a little complacent.
Mm.
And they felt the passion again, I guess, to work hard. And at the time, the meta was really leaning towards like Funky Ana, Brig, or like people were playing Diva. And those were not, I think, necessarily the strengths that Timeless had at the time. So they ended up having to learn an Alari comp. And we knew about halfway through the week that they were preparing for Alari. So then we started preparing to go against Alari. I think at the end of the day, we kind of missed the mark on the actual execution of what we prepared for. But to be honest, like they just played well and they prepared and they did well. So that was basically it. But I think the first time definitely they weren't ready. That we knew how to play against Ram, and we had coached very specifically on how to play dive against Ram.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I also think like our players played exceptionally well that weekend as well. It was some of the best like coordination that I'd ever seen from them up until that point. So
Yeah, and what like what are some of the things that you took away from stage three, especially now that you've picked up two of the players from the team that knocked you out last stage?
yeah. Uh, so what did I like learn from stage three? Is what you're trying to say?
Yeah, or it's I'm
Yeah.
thinking actually especially of that sort of experience of getting beat by the team,
Mm,
getting honestly beat badly by the team that you had beaten badly the week prior. Um,
mm. I think the main thing that I learned from stage three um, was one, how important experience is for feel for making a roster, I think one thing we really suffered from was a lack of like we had a full rookie roster essentially on that stage. Like players that would get nervous being on stream. Even like we had a player tell us that he was really nervous to play on stream and it affected his gameplay. And understanding sort of how to mentally reset yourself in a official, how to make adjustments that aren't playing towards that play towards your strengths, basically. Because there are times where maybe you want to like full switch your comp, but maybe the comp that you're going to is not like, the best for you, right? Understanding how to do that in an official is a skill, especially because in scrims I can talk to them, right? I can't talk to them in the official, so they have to figure it out on their own. And then I guess the second thing that I learned was just like how to prepare players for officials. Like it sounds like a really dumb thing, but like, during scrims, like you really want to give feedback and talk to them about things that they can improve. But during officials, like I think you really want to approach it from a confidence, like building perspective. And like specifically like bringing in like Bun and Scuffed, I think Bun in particular has been in the scene for a long time. Scuffed has as well. They were in like tier two, the one of the previous timeless rosters, and both of them have been competing a high level for a while. So bringing them in, I think, one, guess it also gave us a little bit of like insight into what was going on with timeless ethereal during that stage, but also some insight on how they approach officials and how to prepare for officials. And I really like this weekend. I really saw a lot of that actually. Like I think Bun in particular is a really good teammate. Actually, she had a lot of like really good insight and feedback into getting us back to that point on Sunday. So as much as I said like, oh, we told them to go touch grass, I think like Bun was also like a really large contributor into what helped us reset mentally on Sunday. So I learned a lot from a teaching perspective.
Yeah. If we're talking about players who have had a lot of experience in officials, I think we have to talk about Wub.
Of course. Yeah.
Overwatch League player, if on not necessarily no, he won a game with Paris. He was on the team when they won that one game that year. But so something that I'm thinking of is when I look at this Bun Wub DPS line, and I know you have Durpee as well, but I don't imagine he's going to play all that much unless no offense to Durpee. I love Durpee. I love Durpee the Pokemon as well. But something I look at when I look at this DPS line is it reminds me of sometimes when you have two DPS players that are both kind of hyperflexes, as Wub and Bun are, as much as Wub has kind of shifted his focus to hit scan. He still has a lot of past experience on heroes like Genji and Pharah, etc. And Bun is arguably just kind of a complete hyperflex at this point. You sometimes can run into an issue where both of your DPS players, when they can kind of play everything, they will sometimes just go on swapping sprees. I'm reminded in particular of like SF Shock last year when you had like Proper and Heesang. They would just be basically playing mystery heroes. I think Proper and Stalker had that problem earlier this year. Thinking of, even like early Vancouver Titans, like when they had Shockwave and he who will not be named, just like it's sort of too much flexibility in the DPS line. It kind of can break apart your structure. Well, one, do you agree with that framing? And then if so, kind of what are you doing to sort of, maybe mitigate some of those potential pitfalls?
Yeah, I definitely seen some mystery heroes being played. But I do view flexibility as more of a strength. I think it allows us to play basically whatever we want and have an answer to anything. But I think sometimes you have to talk with players about why is this not working? Like really approach from that line of thinking of like, is this not working because it is just a bad pick? Or is it not working because of the way that you're playing it? Is it not working because of how the team is playing it? Right? You can be playing your character completely perfectly, but if your team is playing for a different win condition, you're not going to find success. So I think a lot of that comes from VOD and trial and error, to be honest. And we had a lot of those discussions over the weekend, and as well this week we've been talking about it. Like I said, I definitely have seen the mystery heroes thing happen, but I think that's kind of a necessary process, especially in practice. So like scrims are practice, right? So obviously you want to treat them as officials so that way you can get sort of that practice. But at the end of the day, you want to see what works and what doesn't work. So as long as the swaps that they're making are not rage swaps, because they're tilted and they feel like they have to carry, I'm cool with them trying stuff. And then if they tell me, hey, like this felt really good, I want to keep trying this, then I think that that's an asset, to be honest. So
Yeah, that's a really good way of looking at it. And then I want to wrap up here by talking about you a little bit. I think it's really cool that you like are a scientist. You have a PhD. You're working at the unspecified institution in an unspecified location. So I want to ask, like, how do you feel like your academic background kind of influences your coaching style?
so I guess like the first thing that comes to mind is so I work in in a lab, in a research lab, and I say anybody has worked in especially like a biology research lab before. There's a lot of failure. You fail a lot. Uh, Experiments don't work for a million reasons. You have to do the same experiment 10, 15, 20 times just to figure out like what are the like correct conditions to assess the problem that you're looking at. Um, and that sort of having to deal with repeated failure over and over and over again, I think has helped me a lot, not just as a coach, but as a player. I compete well. And having that experience, I think, helped make me mentally stronger. Um, the other thing that I think is more of a two-way street is like between academia and coaching is that I actually think coaching has helped me prepare a lot for potentially my future career as like a mentor for students in a lab. I don't think there's actually anything like it, to be honest. Like honestly, you can take like teaching classes, but how do you learn how to foster a multi-year mentorship relationship with somebody? Um, and I think like learning how to coach has like, especially because I started at a lower level, right? Like I started at like a low GM team, right? And like, so in those situations, you're really teaching fundamentals, right? Like I'm teaching to students, but like as I've climbed, I guess, as a coach, I'm now teaching with them. And like realistically, the players know more than I do. They're better players than me. They play the game more often. And having that sort of reciprocal relationship where I talk with them, I think is really similar to the relationship that ends up happening in academia, where you have a professor that starts teaching a student that doesn't know anything. And then as they progress through their research, now they are the expert in their field. And now you provide more guidance and work with them to create a better project. So I think in that way, I've learned a lot about how to teach. And I've failed a lot at it, a lot of times where I missed the mark. Um, but I do feel like I've learned how to uh, simplify and make things really accessible for players and also for my own students that I have, because I do have students here as well that I work with, and hopefully making things easy for them and build their own confidence and their own ability to function independently. I feel like I've learned a lot
Mm-hmm.
from both sides, and both can help with each other.
Yeah.
So
One last little question. Do any of your students know about your secret double life as an esports coach?
my undergrad knows that I play Overwatch and that I coach, but I don't know if he knows exactly to what extent. I have like Overwatch stickers like all over my laptop. So I gave I gave a talk over the summer at a conference, and like two people came up to me and they were like, "Oh my God, you play Overwatch? Add me on Discord." I was like, "Okay." And we played some quick play. We played some League together. It was fun, and uh, when we got destroyed by Toronto last stage, I like linked them the stream. I was like, "Hey, we're playing. Watch us probably lose this game, but it's fun." But I mean, people in my lab know that I coach, but I don't know if they know to what extent
Mm-hmm.
it is. So, which is fine. I'm okay with it.
That's delightful. Yeah. Well, thanks a lot for your time and sitting down with me. Good luck
Yeah.
in stage 4. I think we're all really excited to see what this retooled Avidity roster can do.
Hopefully, you'll see us in the main event. That should be fun.
Yeah. Well, thanks a lot for your time.
Yeah, no problem. My laptop is dying, so it's really good timing.
All right. See ya.
All right. Bye bye.